Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we can fit it into our role-playing campaigns. With me, as ever, is Fiona, the host, the founder, the ruler, I've used many, the zenith.
Just your Majesty will do.
Predator.
Oh no! Wow!
I don't know. I was trying to think of like other high level.
Maybe you are my Alex Horn and I am your Greg Davis Taskmaster style.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah.
Okay. Hamilton, how are you, my friend?
How am I? I'm good now. Good now.
Now that we're here.
Now we're here. No. Yes, I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Fiona?
I'm good. I picked this topic coming up, and I'll admit, I think this is the first time in a while I've certainly bitten off more than I can chew.
Yeah. This is the first one you've had to message me 5 days in and say, we're going to split this in two.
Yes.
And I was like, thank God.
Are you sure? Yes.
Yeah. I don't think I responded. I think I just went, okay, because it was like, as if that's obvious. Interesting, though. Definitely interesting. Before we get on to our topic, though, we haven't talked about this yet in our hours of chatting already before we did this recording. How was your D&D game yesterday?
It was very good. Yes, we are now level 19. You know, it's the final stages of the third act and we're like wrapping things up and there's a massive problem that we have to solve. And it's basically, if you imagine like a huge big puzzle and we're like, there's 4 options we can do first, but we have to do them all. But depending on which one we go first will impact the others and means that maybe people will be aware of that we're there. Maybe we're going to lose time. If we fuck up at any point, the worlds are going to implode. And so it was that sort of thing where we're all like, which one should we do first? All that sort of thing. So we had that sort of like mild dilemma between the 3 of the players. But the fun bit, and I'm sure at some point we'll have to do a DM's book club on spells that you should watch out for a DM, like wish and all that, and time stop and all that sort of thing. My friend Sam used for the first time, I've never heard of this spell before, but it's called Maze. And it's an 8th level spell. It is a check, not a save. So we got rid of a legendary creature which couldn't use its resistances, and we're just hoping it doesn't roll any higher than a 20, an intelligence check 20, before we finish up what we need to do. But it's currently stuck in a maze for 10 minutes. And so I like to think it's that screensaver, that old Windows screensaver, just like, it's just so... But it was incredible because we all were like, does this mean it's gone? And then of course we were like, had that roll and they were like, it doesn't reappear. And we're like, oh, we got a quick... And then we finished the session, unfortunately, because it was getting late. But we were like, oh, so yeah. So that was a very cool spell that I'd not seen before.
The only other maze it makes me think of is the one from Encarta when you have to answer questions with the weird, creepy clown.
Oh, the Jester. Yeah. Oh. Hamilton, I know we could talk about me doing D&D for a long time. What's our topic today? What's the one where I was like,
what is the topic?
Whoops.
Well, actually, I'm going to give the players a bit more in background. It started first off, let's do Ravnica. And then it was like, well, let's do a couple of chapters of Ravnica. Then it was like, let's just do the Guilds of Ravnica. Let's just do half the Guilds of Ravnica.
Let's do half the Guilds of Ravnica, yes.
And then we'll do the other half next week. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. That is what we're doing. So so Ravnica, for the uninitiated, I'd say, including myself, is the first Dungeons & Dragons Magic the Gathering setting that got released a couple of years ago. So this is originally a setting for Magic the Gathering. It's been the subject of 8 card sets, which I didn't realise. And amongst fans of Magic, it is one of the most popular settings because of the world's 10 guilds strongly supporting the way the players build their decks. In case you haven't played Magic at all, this idea that you build your decks depending on different sort of energies and that sort of thing. So, and they're always based around a theme or a family and all that sort of thing. And then you fight other decks essentially, which I know is has a very convoluted, like plain speak way of doing it. But the idea that you had 10 of these different kinds of guilds that use different combinations of these energies and stuff, it was just interesting. So it made sense for Wizards to be like, well, why don't we just create a setting for it so that Magic the Gathering players can come into D&D
Hmm.
rather than the other way around. And of course, we've seen it with other settings as well. We've got this Mythic Odysseys of Theros, that is also Magic the Gathering setting, and Strixhaven most recently.
However, unlike Strixhaven, which was made at the same time, so they were made as concurrent D&D and Magic the Gathering releases, whilst Ravnica was around for a while, I think, before.
Yes, Ravnica's been around since sort of early noughties, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and the reason I wanted to cover it was because nobody talks about Ravnica. It's like some sort of big secret.
And actually, I don't know of any actual plays off the top of my head that do Ravnica either. There probably is one, but it's not popular. It's not like Eberron, which is definitely more people are in that world.
Exactly. So the only references I know of Ravnica, and the only reason I know how to pronounce Ravnica, is because Acquisition Incorporated did a couple of episodes in Ravnica when Jeremy Crawford took over and sort of introduced this whole world and stuff like that, and they fought against various guilds and stuff for like 2 or 3 episodes because it was all live shows rather than like ongoing series, and then they quickly disappeared off into another realm.
And it makes a lot of sense, as we'll find out, because there's a very lot of Acquisitions Incorporated relational things to the sort of guildness and the sort of leveling up in a guild that we'll talk about. So that, and as I said to you earlier, I said it has that sort of feel to it. So the setting then, Fiona, it's kind of cool, right? I quite like the sort of Central European sort of like character to the sort of architecture and styling of it, which is what they say that's like built on it's a world that is covered in a singular city, which is Ravnica itself, and the world is called Ravnica. But it's all this sort of like Viennese and sort of Florence, sort of like Hungary, Budapest sort of style of that sort of areas of like Central Europe sort of stylings that's quite beautifully rendered in the books, and as with a lot of the D&D books, lots of great art, but it kind of is quite evocative, and it does have its own quality to it, which reminded me personally a little bit of when I first listened to campaign 2 of Critical Role, was that just noticing that like a lot of settings that we have the classic medieval setting, which is very Anglo-Saxon / bit of French influences as well, sort of Gallic sort of qualities, but there's very little in the way of like Germanic sort of moving into those central like Hungarian and even Italian sort of innate sort of like Renaissance stylings. I don't even see a lot of that in D&D, and I think that this brings a little bit of that, and so did campaign of which I think made campaign 2 quite particular and individual, with the fact that it was very European. It was it had that German Dwendalian Empire, and it had the very Mediterranean
the Kryn
dynasty being it's like, well, I guess that was slightly its own thing, but I was thinking more Nicodranus and all that stuff was all the sort of beaches and stuff, which was all anyway. I think it has its own quality, which is worth investigating.
This idea that the whole world is based around these 10 guilds that have the relationships with each other, they hate each other, they're vying for power. So there's this whole big power struggle between 10 of them. Now I know people will be like, 10's a lot, but it makes sense for Magic the Gathering. So that's why, again, I suggested kindly that we break it up into 2 just so we can have a bit of detail on it. But as well as that, it just feels like there's a lot you can do with it, but maybe it just doesn't stand out compared to other campaign settings, or so you like Theros, you're like, okay, you got your Greek mythology, so you're going to have different monsters, and Strixhaven always based at a school, etc. Oh, you got all these other adventures that thinking out what came out, like Rime of the Frost Maiden. Oh, that's
your snowy peaks.
Exactly. So whereas this is a huge city with 10 guilds.
I just don't think it's marketed right. I think that's what it is, because I think it talks about the guilds and not about the city and the setting. And I think a lot of those really play off their setting. Yes. And so it's the political Central European drama of like there's a Borgias show, or like, do you know what I mean? It makes you think of a Versailles a little bit, that sort of show, that sort of like Renaissance, which again is something that I think a lot of like indie TTRPGs play a lot on and get interested in. And I think it's something that I think maybe it just isn't the right book and the right way it's been published, but I think there is something there that could be very individual.
And just to say, each of these 10 guilds, they have their own distinct identity and sort of civic function. So they actually have to work together in order for Ravnica to come about, right? And each of them, it's what's interesting, and as we'll go into, each of the guilds gives sort of a purpose and what their goals are, general sort of identity, suggested class and races for each one, which again, maybe we'll come away from that a little bit, because obviously you can play anything and anyone now, which is fine, but it gives a little reason why, about, for example, you're playing a cleric, well then you could have a specialist role in this particular one. If you're a spellcaster, there's this one, which I thought was quite cool, that people with certain roles will have certain things that are different in each of the guilds, and they'll put their skills to use, so no one is ever underutilized, so to speak. What I also thought, before we go into sort of maybe diving into a little bit more about the other cool thing about the setting, which is the renown stuff, is that I think you could have, you know how I was saying before with Blood Hunters, when we talked about that last series, I think you could have one-on-one games using Ravnica.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a whole bit about it talking about why you would join a certain guild, and how you could have parties that are all from the same guild or parties all from different guilds, and how you deal with that. But I feel like, certainly, like we're going to talk about House Dimir and stuff like that, you could easily do one-on-one sessions where you're just getting contracts and stuff like that. I actually could see everyone playing the same guild as well, and that depending on what that guild is, what their mission is, and like what they're trying to get. If people are playing different guilds, that's fine. You just maybe need to work a little bit harder than that. But I easily, when I read this, I was like, oh, you can do one-on-ones, really straightforward.
And also because it could be a very particular focus on someone's journey to the top of a guild, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. Or it's like, except that one person's going to take on that mantle, if that's what you want to do in a group game.
Let's quickly talk about the history of Ravnica in a very, very potted thing. So you could read all about this on the Forgotten Realms wiki. 10,000 years ago, these 10 sort of armies were fighting for control, and it was conflict and terrible, and it ended because of this creation of a magical contract of immense power known as the Guildpact. So each of these sort of 10 leaders were the signatories of these guild pacts, and then eventually they became the first guild masters of Ravnica. And the text of the guild pact spelled out specific roles for each guild within the infrastructure of Ravnica itself, so it allowed the city to grow whilst also allowing the guilds to coexist in peace. So it's basically a big peace treaty. And then it sort of ended. There was a big celebration which sort of broke, and then the balance was sort of shattered, and Ravnica was sort of thrown into this chaos again. And as a result, there were sort of people trying to take advantage of stuff and everything. And eventually, the power was sort of restored in an actual person, like a living person who became known as the living guild pact. So this idea that his word becomes law. He says something, it happens. But he is a planeswalker. So for decades at a time, he will disappear and go off to other planes and help out with stuff there before coming back. Now he's set up this idea that it's modern day Ravnica, and the leader, the person, the guild pact isn't here. And so you had these guilds are like, I'm just going to grab some power. Should I do that? You know, and it's just that tension. So it's that idea, that little bit of conflict. We've talked about it in a previous podcast. This idea of
someone
conflict.
Might come back at any minute. The teacher could come back any minute, but that sense of I could write something on the blackboard. You know, I could go to I could start messing with the equations or something like that. It's that sort of thing, isn't it?
It's interesting because now you have this whole sort of themes about like sort of subterfuge, sort of infiltration, sabotage, theft, deceptions. So it's a whole political. It's almost like a Cold War type campaign between the guilds, and that's where most of the adventures are about. It's not about
saving the world.
You might clear dungeons of monsters or something like that, or you might steal an artifact, but essentially the story is always focused on this power tension between the guilds. And that is interesting because I don't think there are many games that really deliberately focus on that. It's always like beat the big bad boss at the end. This is so different because it's such little shifts of power between the guilds, which might come to nothing because the living guild pact might just come back at any point.
It sets up a really good, as I said, a level of tension. It creates a really good sort of level playing field of like there's an order with this just like enough freedom for it to go whatever way you want it to go and push in different, like why would it leaves that answer of why would they want to break this pact or why would they want to break the stalemate? Well, it's because there's a really good reason. A little bit unlike in the Planescape campaign, because it's very similar in that sense. It reminds me of Sigil a lot, you know, in the sense that it's factions. That's factions, and they have faction hierarchies, and there are similar things. But unlike the factions in Sigil are much more philosophical based, these are much more. They are still philosophical. They've definitely got much more action behind them as well. But in that setting, you've got this Lady of Pain character who literally lords over everything and can maze people at any 5 seconds. So the sense of like they do try and push, but they push much more subtly. And if one gets too powerful, there is a god being who can just go no. whilst in this setting, you can keep pushing and pushing, which kind of makes it more interesting, I think.
What I would say, and again, not to spring it on you, Hamilton, at all, but in chapter 1, there is an interesting questionnaire for if you're trying to pick what guild you want to be. And it's like a little flow chart, which is quite cute. I've never seen that before of a if you're not sure what to play. Because again, I guess it's supposed to introduce D&D players to the world of Ravnica, and obviously 10 guilds, as we've discovered, quite overwhelming at times. So it was just interesting to see that you could have this questionnaire and just have it picked for you. You could roll randomly, all that sort of thing. But this is the key thing. Obviously, there's 10 guilds. Majority of people in Ravnica do belong to a guild. However, there are people who don't belong to guilds. They're guildless. And about 50% of the population aren't stuck to a guild. So there's this a silent majority, I guess, that has a voice, but also it has a tension there as well. So maybe like an unofficial 11th guild, the guildless, that sort of thing. And so you have to maybe deal with them as well, that people might treat you differently because you lose a guild, you are excommunicated or exiled from a guild and that sort of thing. There's rules there's the ways for changing guilds. What happens when you gain enough renown and you go up, and if you leave a guild, what happens to that renown and all that sort of thing. So there is a lot in that first couple of chapters about the rules, essentially, the social rules of it, which I think are important for this setting when it's all about the power struggles between guilds. So I'll quickly just talk about renown before we go on to the actual stuff. So renown is basically what sets Ravnica apart as a Magic the Gathering campaign setting. It's just similar to how there was piety in Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and how you have basically the report card in Strixhaven. Renown essentially is that as you advance and sort of rub shoulders with the rest of the guild, and that you advance their goals, so does your status. And as you sort of go up, you get additional boons and stuff. So it sort of tells you about general things you get at levels. Like, I think it's like, it depends on how much you get. And again, that's up to the DM's discretion. But essentially, within all these guilds, there are sort of 4 unofficial ranks. They could be like, you get them in this order, or they're not associated at all that sort of thing. But it's usually 4 different things that are specialized, and you get certain benefits on that, as you were sort of saying, raise through the ranks until possibly you're going to be one of the heads of the army, or one of the advisors to the guildmaster, or even the guildmaster themselves.
And the same thing happens in the joining the factions in Dragon Heist. You get renown points as well, so it uses a similar system as well. Similar
system.
So, should we talk about what these first 5 interesting guilds are?
Sure. So, what are the first 5, Hamilton? What would be your Spark Notes summary?
Spark Notes.
Sort of bio of each one.
Okay, the bio of each one. So you have, first up, the Azorius Senate. Basically, bringing order from chaos is the term. It says they are the legal and bureaucratic backbone of the city. It is your lawyers, your judges, your senators, basically, of the city. Agreed. In a nutshell, that's what they do. Make the laws and not enact the laws in terms of policing, but they do have policing. Sorry,
they do have a police force, but it's police force, legislative, and judicial stuff.
Exactly, that's it. Then is the Boros Legion, which is righteous zeal, soldiers who take up steel against the corruption and lawlessness that ignore at the City of Ravnica. Seen a little bit as they're a military enforcer, but with a hint of vigilante and righteousness chucked in there for good measure.
If they see wrongdoing, they're going to sort it. They're not going to ask questions later. That's the sort of vibe you get from they're sort of a standing army of Ravnica. Yeah.
They're like a bit like the Harmonium from Sigil.
Yes.
It's very similar. House Dimir is a dark secret behind a facade of respectable messengers and reporters. Lurks an association of spies and assassins.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty much says it all, really. I don't think you need to say more than that.
Recently thought extinct. So that's the idea that they don't exist anymore, but they do.
Yes. Exactly. Then the Golgari Swarm, teeming masses that compose the arts themselves pragmatic above us, uncovered by the simple fact that death is a part of the cycle of life. They're interesting. They are the Ravnica's agriculture and manager of waste.
I know. I love that. Again, if you think of like Parks and Rec, it's like the Randy from the sewage department or whatever it is. And you're just like, manages food production and organic waste. But I do love their description and stuff, which we'll go into. But it is a bit like, ooh, don't like that.
They're sort of like the recyclers, but in more ways than just your waste. Do you know? Do you know what I mean?
We're taking out the recycling, and you're dead.
And
yes.
you're dead. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to grow some fungus. So it seems like there's all those people. And then the Gruul clans, which is very much your barbarians, but you're very much associated with nature and imposing, anarchistic in the sense of wanting to remove civilization in a way for a more natural, primal world is kind of how I put it.
I completely agree. Yeah, they don't like civilization. They sort of on the fringes of society. They used to be sort of the keepers of the Ravnica's wilds, but now they're just nothing but this sort of loose affiliation of berserker clans who seek to wipe civilization from the plane, which is like, ooh, interesting. So yes, those are the first 5, and I think they're an interesting bunch to sort of compare and contrast to, because obviously you got law on one side, and then no law and lack of civilization on the other. Food, army, and secrets. House Dimir, which I'm just like, it's my favorite one. I'm sorry, but it is my favorite one because it's so cool.
I mean, again, I was reading it and I went, well, I know which one Fiona is going to choose because, well, it's obvious.
Yeah, it is.
I'd be interested to know which one you think I would choose.
Out of these first 5?
Oh, no, because, well, yeah, okay, that's giving it away because one of them, I wouldn't choose it. I think if I was going to choose it, it'd probably have to be the Dimir out of all of them because they're the most fun. Do you know which one I would choose?
Out of all 10 of them?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That's a tricky one. Maybe the Is It League, perhaps? I
was between the Is It League and the Celestia Conclave but I didn't like their army bit. I just like the idea of they're about peace and going into the nature and having harmony between nature and civilization. And I was going a bit hippie happy. I kind of liked it.
Happy.
Yeah, it has dryads in it, and like it's all a little bit fun. But we'll come to them next.
We'll come back to that to the next episode. Let's start at the beginning. The Azorius Senate. Is that how you pronounced it before?
Azorius
Senate. So this is the idea. It's very similar to how laws work in most countries, but the idea that you have sort of 3 branches, each led by an arbiter, and the capitals of these sort of 3 columns, they are the triumvirate, which then advise the guildmaster, which happens to be an ancient and wise sphinx. So this idea that you can't trick them in any way. They're all knowledgeable and all knowing, that sort of thing.
It's really annoying they didn't call because they called them the columns and then the capital of a column, because that's the top of a column. They didn't call either the judge, the supreme leader, the entablature, or the pediment, because that's what it should have been. Because that's the next step.
They missed the trick.
They missed their architectural rope, their classical architecture notification. I like the fact that they realised that they knew that capital was the top of a column. It's not a lot of people know that.
Well, you can write into Wizards of the Coast.
I will write into Wizards of the Coast and say, I'd like them to be called the entablature, please. Or the pediment.
And then they'll say, in your world of Ravnica, they can be. And
they will. That's what they... Oh, yeah, of course, they are. That's what they're called now.
So of course, on one hand, you've got like a column that's all about judges and extensive legal apparatus around them. Then you've got another column that sort of writes and enacts the laws. And then finally, you've got the enforcers of the laws, aka the Magic Police Force, which I really like this concept. It made me think of obviously like stuff like The Watch.
Bit of Minority Report in there as well, isn't there?
Minority Report was the one I had as well.
Because they've got precogs. They've got precognition thing. I was like,
so cool. Law Mages is the official title. I was thinking Harry Dresden, that sort of thing. Arresters as well. So these are in the law enforcement sort of branch. These are the different roles you could have, and each one of them, like Law Mages, and obviously anything with mages, obviously spellcaster, but the Arresters, they're more sort of like the fighter types, all that sort of thing. So again, there's a role for anyone and you could fit it in pretty well. I love the idea. And the other thing I'd say with all these guilds, I meant to say this at the beginning, is that it breaks it down into this like what it is, the goals of this guild, what kind of characters are part of it, so like what usual types of alignments, suggested races, classes. But what I do think is quite good is like you might enjoy this guild if you like any of the following statements. So for Azorius, you've got drawn to the idea of a hard-bitten police officer trying to impose order on a chaotic world. If you like the idea of using magic to control enemies, or if you like in playing an enchanter wizards, clerics of law, or unbending paladins. And I'm just like, ooh, and they're very cool statements where you go, oh yeah, I like the sound of that. So, and they have this for each of the guilds, this idea, like statements which you go, oh, that does sound quite cool. If you were trying to, like, I guess, talk to your players, like, what would you like? And then you go, oh, do any of these statements appeal to you? I thought that was quite good. And then obviously it goes into a bit of detail about it. You get this background.
Yeah, the backgrounds are very interesting. And it has a similar thing to like Strixhaven as well, where you get particular proficiencies and backgrounds that work with the guild, as well as guild spells as well, which add to your spellcasting no matter what. So it highlights this in the saying that, you know, you have these additional spells because the setting is a very magical setting, and also they benefit your actual functioning in that guild, and everyone else has them, so it sort of balances out in that regard. So, and I love that in Strixhaven, and I like it here a lot.
I like it here as well, and I do like, again, with each of the guild spells, it gives a little flavour about what they look like as well. So for the Azorius, your magic often takes on the form of blue or golden runes floating in the air, glowing, and circular patterns or shimmering azure barriers of magical energy. Like, ooh, love that flavour. That's pretty cool. As usual with sort of these backgrounds, you get the suggested characteristics, obviously sort of ideals, bonds, and flaws. But here's the interesting thing, is contacts as well. Yes. So the idea that you would roll, I'm going to get this wrong because I only looked really at House Dimir for this, so apologies. It's me looking around again.
You roll twice on your in-guild contacts and then once on a non-guild contact. And the two in-guilds are an ally and a rival. And then the non-Azorius contact, it says either it could be an ally or rival, or as a rival or as an ally. It could be either, depending on the guild's relationship between the two. But it's left up to your discretion. But I like the fact that you do have at least one rival and one ally in your own guild, which makes for good conflict.
Again, very similar to Strixhaven in a way, without that, oh, well, you have 1 point against them, all this sort of thing. Or it isn't, with Strixhaven, it talks about obviously having these NPCs that have, like, can give you certain boons and banes, all that sort of thing. Not so much here, but I think that's okay, because you have so much to be getting on with. It's only good. It's good for maybe like an info, not an info dumpster, but like an information point. And it's a rival who's just slipped you something, and it's just like, you've got this mission now. But yeah, this idea that certainly with the Azorius Senate, it's a sprawling bureaucracy, and so there's loads of people in different positions, so you're definitely going to find something that can pull strings, or find that other person that has the connection somewhere. So I just thought, again, a really good description of like what kind of context you should have from that. And again, you can look at these tables in your own time. We won't go into them in too much detail, but it's all 10 of these guilds have a lot of information about them, but also I think that's good because it's a good flavour system, so you can really embed yourself into Ravnica as well.
And then in that, as you said, talk about renown and the levelling up within the guilds. You can become a capital.
Yes.
You can become like one of the semi-leaders of this thing. So that is just kind of, I don't know, it sets up that, as we talked about, that sort of campaign, that singular campaign of like rising to the top and sort of and really getting ingratiated in one sort of these guilds.
With renown as well, just like piety in Mythic Odysseys and Theros, you don't have to have it in there. It is completely optional, but it is quite fun because it, certainly with the Azorius Senate, is that it talks about here, for example, there is a certain rank, so that you have to go through these things and get this sort of thing. But if you're a law mage, you now get the title of Justicator and all that. And I just like, I think bureaucracy of that is just ridiculous. And you get some flavour benefits in the sense of you won't go hungry, you've got lodgings, you've got more contact, all that sort of thing. But I just, certainly for the Azorius Senate, it was just quite fun how it does feel like you get a new title, write that down.
But it's just because then they're all names of people that are in, again, in the Warhammer books that I've read, like the Eisenhorn, the Inquisition sort of ones that they do, and they have like arbiters and judicars and stuff, and I was like, just kind of gave me those sort of feels, so I was like, I was enjoying it because of that.
And then it talks about, again, further up you go, certainly on this stuff, you get like access to more people, so you might get a squad of people that you have to organise, and this happens to a couple of guilds, and I'm just thinking to myself, that sounds like a nightmare as a player, just like, okay, you guys do this, I guess, like, again, it makes for an interesting storytelling. So going back to the idea of if you're a one-on-one one-shot or a group of people, I think the one-on-one stuff, because as you said, you get higher and higher, so you become sort of almost like the advisor to the guild master, so you could be having one-on-one chats and influencing laws and stuff like that. And what if you'd been corrupted in some way? What if there's a Judge Dredd thing going on and you're just there going, And maybe one of the other capitals is like, oh, something's not right.
Up to no good, yeah. And also, but if you became a capital, you've got like the whole of this. I want you to. I'd be forcing that player some rousing speeches. You know what I mean? Come on. Yeah. This is what you need.
It'll be proper debates and what's the one where they prevent things from going through and then they have to talk for ages?
Geez.
Filibuster.
Filibuster.
But yeah, that's essentially in a nutshell. That is the Azorius Senate. I just want to start with because obviously it's such a big backbone, of the laws and stuff with the living Guildpact and stuff like that. It makes total sense to have that in this first episode, but also just to be aware of it. I think, you might not know much as a player about all the other ones, but I think this is one you probably come into contact the most, either because you're making laws or breaking them, or enforcing them.
Exactly. So then the next one is the Boros Legion. Who every time, which again, as it said, are very much Harmonium level. This sort of idea of you make peace and lawfulness by fighting people, basically, and forcing people to be good. As in, and it's a bit, there's always that tension in that idea. They were established to serve as the standing army at first, and then they started turning into more of a law enforcement. And they have an angelic guildmaster.
Yes, an archangel. Yes, so this idea that it's basically an army led by angels. And you might think, oh, that's good. And you go, that's probably not very good. That's probably, you're thinking, again, obviously unrelated, but like Avernus, obviously you got Zariel and that whole shebang of what's happening there. Shebang. But this idea that, this it was what you described as before, this sort of zealousness, sort of righteousness. It's like, we are right, we are going to bring the law. And it's interesting to have this idea that you've got this mixture of humanoids or mortal races and angels. And it's this idea that the laws come down from the angels and you have to obey. Because, they are deeply respected. They have strategic war leaders and all that sort of thing. It's just, it's a scary one, I think.
They do have a bit of the Robin Hoodness to them as well. They're trying to maintain, stopping criminals who exploit people and pesticide. So they've got a little bit of positive morality as well.
I guess it's they're passionate about the pursuit of justice.
That's what they say, passionate. Yeah. And they're also very nervous about this Guildpact leaving, and therefore are very much in a heightened state of preparedness.
Always on alert. So so looking at this, they're usually good, often aligned if you're playing a character that's from the Boros Legion. Suggested races include human, goblin, and minotaur. There's a big section about minotaurs on this one, which I thought was actually fun, because minotaurs, they appear in Theros as well, and they get a bit of a rep, I think, in Theros. Suggested classes: cleric, fighter, paladin, ranger, wizard. Consider the Boros Legion if one of the following statements rings true for you. So you're drawn to the ideal of the knight in shining armor, which is I think that's a great thing, because you're like, that sounds good, and you go, oh, probably not. That's because of what it stands for. You like playing clerics, paladins, or disciplined fighters. Smiting foes with holy radiance fills you with righteous joy. And then, you want to protect the innocent and fighting for justice. That's like the last little thing.
I mean, that's the only one I'm like, okay, maybe. But the other ones I'm like, nope, no. They're basically focusing on martial training, study of magic, and military magic. So, and so with the backgrounds, you gain the spells you gain are very much like Sacred Flame and Heroism and Beacon of Hope and Binding Smite and all those sorts of spells.
Flame Strike.
Flame Strike.
Suggested characteristics. So it talks about this legion being a zealous army full of righteous energy tempered with military discipline. So if you're not sure how that, you're thinking that everyone's really passionate, but there is a discipline there. They're not going to go gun ho compared to some of the other guilds. This idea that they are devoted to the ideal of justice, or they find satisfaction in more warfare oriented aspects of the legion's work. So that's the way you sort of should think about when you're creating a character, like what sort of attitudes or what sort of maybe beliefs you will be holding if you're part of this guild. Looking at the contact stuff, the order structure of the Boros Legion offers loads of opportunities to make friends and rivals in higher places. So this idea that there's a fucking angel that hates your guts. I don't like you, Smith, like Private Smith or whatever. But again, that idea that, you know, your close friends and contacts in other guilds will have an emphasis on order and community in some way, or you'll have enemies that are, you know, against that, so chaos and destruction. So again, if you were just rolling on the table, you're like, oh, okay, this is the tension that we have between us.
Well, I think when you read the "How do I fit in" chapter bit of it, it's like, it goes, literally says, what are you doing? Bringing dangerous threats like the Radkos and Gruul in line. Then it goes like, you want to stop the shipments of rot-infested vegetation from the Golgari, the violent uprising among the guildless. You also don't like the Dimir spies, not really keen about the overzealous or corrupt senators, and you don't like the experiments that everyone else is doing. So who do you like? No one. That is basically what it says. You're basically at war with everyone.
Yeah. You're like, well, we are right, but we're justified in finding justice.
Exactly.
No, absolutely.
So you're not going to have that many friends.
Here's the interesting one in the Boros Legion. So the ranks and stuff, you have the normal sort of like sergeant going up to brigadier, captain, commander, but you also have special roles. And this is where, if you were like, you know what I want to do? I want to be a fighter pilot. You go, cool, there's a role for that. It's called the Sky Knight, where you mount on Skyjet rocks and patrol the skies above Ravnica.
I mean, that I was kind of like, kind of cool, kind of cool. And the next one, kind of cool, because I quite like the idea of the military intelligence role, which is the Wojek, which would be like, I kind of like that sort of Federal of Independence, and that sort of like, you could be the not so righteous, you know, it's not that you're the more like MI5s that are just like sneaking around, being a bit sneaky, but not doing it but doing it to try and get like secret intelligence and stuff like that, and kind of, which I know is what the Dimir are more, but it's kind of, I just kind of like that.
Yeah, I think out of all those sort of renown and ranks, the Sky Knights and the Wojek, they are the most interesting parts of it. And those are special roles as well. So as long as you meet the sort of prerequisites, which is usually like, oh, you've got this renowned or higher, then you'll get into it. And again, talk to your DM about it. If it's like, oh, I really want to try this, because I love the idea that you have a Boros Legion party that's all Sky Knights, or they're all Wojeks, and they're finding out, you know, intelligence and stuff like that. Yeah, so you could have a proper undercover mission and stuff. You're trying to root out House Dimir spies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Shall we move on to the best guild?
You know what? Yeah, they are pretty cool. I'm not going to lie, they are pretty cool.
Best guild for this episode. How's that?
Yeah, they are.
So actually, cool. these are ones where I did think, oh, these are the sort of the Killing Eve, the 12, that sort of thing, or Assassin's Creed. I thought in a way as well. This idea that you have a guild that is non-existent, like hidden in the shadows. Again, I love this facade of like, well, we are the messenger service, we're just sending out couriers and stuff like that, but then it's all a big front for like spies and secrecy. And and the idea that the guild's work is hidden even from its own members. So this is where like I see this one-on-one role play sort of thing coming to it, because you don't know who your contacts are, you don't know any of this. So that idea that you could just suddenly get a mission and then you're like, cool, I'll just go off on that way. But also, if you're in a party as a House Dimir person, you have a false identity. You pretend to be a part of another guild, and you get like some starting equipment and some other bits from that second facade thing. But you're always reporting back to House Dimir.
And I do like the sort of like, you know, only knows each other by a code name, or receives community only by a particular meeting spot, a specific space. So it's a bit more of that military, that sort of MI5-ness, that sort of secrets, and like the eagle has landed, and what happens when the moon hits the elephant? Oh, it falls on the floor. You know, like that.
The elephant has left the room. The only elephant in the room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of, I've got to admit, it is really cool.
So they have a special sort of feature or spell. I know you sort of talk about the spells. This idea of spell of encode forts. And this idea of being telepathic, so that you could get some piece of information and pull it out of your head, a bit pensive style, like from Harry Potter, and you can have it. It's almost like a ribbon. It describes it as like this sort of thing, and you can get key information even from yourself and have it there, or from presumably somebody that you're interrogating, perhaps, or all that sort of thing. And I just was like, ooh. So I love that, this idea you get access to this spell encode for.
The other one I like that they get is meld into stone, because that's actually a really cool one that not people use, but and it's kind of, is it normally a druid spell, I think, isn't it? And so it's not one that generally you get as a rogue, but really cool if you are a rogue.
Again, this idea that, knowledge is power and everything is so secret to tie yourself to. So so if you looking at Dimir characters, you've got obviously neutral, sometimes evil. So I like that idea that you aren't instantly evil in this one. Half-elf and human are suggested races. Classes are monk, rogue, and wizard is suggested as well. Following statements, if you enjoy these, if you want to play in House Dimir, you love subterfuge, intrigue, and deception, tick. You like playing rogues, spies, and assassins, tick. The idea of stealing forts instead of treasure has a special appeal to you, tick.
Big tick.
Big tick. And then here's the interesting one. You want to deceive your fellow players without necessarily betraying them.
Massive tick.
Ooh, because the tension that you would have having that little secret as a
that sort of military, that MI5 that you're still always battling against your the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy sort of can you really trust anyone who's in the intelligence service? Well, of course you can't, and you can never trust even the people you work with. And there was a saying in that Slow Horses that's just come out, which is there's Moscow rules and London rules. And Moscow rules is you're looking in front at the dangers in front. When you're in London, you're always looking at the dangers from behind. Because it's who's going to stab you in the back when you're at home? So I kind of like that. That kind of made me think of that.
That's really good. You begin your house in House Dimir, so when you join, you start off with the small missions, and then you go your way up, and you sort of engage in surveillance, maybe theft, maybe you're stealing stuff from other guilds, hampering their attempts for something, and I like that idea that you're not deliberately, it's not an all-out attack, which some of the other guilds might do, but it's all sort of secretive, we just keep saying that idea of that it's all behind closed doors and nobody really knows who it is. I love
the idea. He's saying a singular campaign, a really tension-filled one would be the one they mentioned. You're infiltrating the Azorius or another guild, and you're getting higher up, and they're going to find me out. And there's little moments, and you can have moments when they sort of they talk. Someone's hinting at something. Do they know? Or maybe one of the other people in there is actually another operative from the Dimir, and then suddenly you find out, and it's a massive twist that I know, it can be really cool. And this has real Dishonored vibes, actually. That just reminded me, because that's sort of that sort of era, and the art. I must admit, the art in this is, again, I keep going back to it, really cool.
The art's really good. You know what? This is the first time I've seen it, and maybe it's just because it's D&D Beyond, and maybe because it's a Magic the Gathering, the first one. It has
all the artists
underneath.
We mentioned this before. Yeah, I was noticing that. I was going to say that. I was really great. Really positive thing.
Yeah, because I was oh, and then I was is this I generally thought, has this been an update to D&D Beyond? And then I looked at it, I was no.
I guess it's probably because they are famous magic artists.
Yeah, they must be used from Magic the Gathering, so maybe there has to be an agreement for that. But you still think
Oh no, but I think people probably follow. I think there's a big following of artists in the magic scene.
That makes sense.
That's what I think. So people are aware of these names as well. So I think that's why.
That makes a lot more sense.
Next up, the Golgari Swarm.
The Golgari Swarm.
Golgari. Yes. I think it needs to have a little bit of Golgari. Got to have a little bit of a role in it.
Yeah, teeming masses that compose the swarm see themselves as pragmatic above all else, uncowed by the simple fact that death is a part of the life cycle. So instantly, this guild has such a cool motivation for grabbing power, because it's this was inevitable. This was inevitable, this would happen. So we're just claiming what is inevitable. And there's no reasoning in that. Ugh.
But there's a factions in Sigil similar, the Doomsguard, who is the everything is entropy and therefore all we're doing is helping it along. But it's a similar thing. It's why not? That's what, it's all going to go to rot in the end. They've got Gorgons in the Golgari, which, again, there's definitely a lot of links to Theros, as you said, with that, which is kind of cool. And the Insectile Crawl, which a new one for me as well.
Being alive is not a prerequisite for leadership. Which is always a great line, I think. So you've got liches in here as well.
To be honest, I've worked at a couple practices like that. Hey.
Again, that sort of subtle working stuff as well. They don't want to get too much attention on them straight away, because obviously they'll be taken over. But this idea that they're slowly working towards it, and this idea that they're just it's about growth and vibrancy of the natural world. Yeah. This idea of destruction, decay, and death, and everything finds a way, and just this patience about it. It's follows it takes its time. It's gonna happen. It's inevitable. Scary.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the artwork, this one of that massive sewer with these skulls on like catacomb things. It's like, it's kind of creepily, but it's really well done, I think. This, similar to a swarm of insects, the Golgari collective behave more like a single organism than a scattering of individuals.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's got definitely that feel to it.
All right, quickly talk about the characters as usual. The sort of alignments, usually neutral, often evil, compared to sometimes evil. Suggested races are human again, elves, dark elves. Suggested classes are druid, fighter, ranger, rogue, wizard. The Golgari Swarm will suit your character if one or more of the following statements are true. You're drawn to the darker side of nature or the greener side of necromancy.
The greener side of necromancy.
Beautiful.
Which just makes me think of Pus, to be honest.
Yeah. You were drawn to sinister, creepy, or grim characters.
Yeah, I see. That's when I thought maybe Fiona, but it's too rotty for Fiona. I thought
it gets a bit squeamish, I guess. But I like that. I'll tell you, I do see them. If I would play a character, I'd be like, hello.
Hello, I'm a fungal druid, which is what they're going to say. But you think like, do you know what they called spores? Circle of spores.
Yeah, the circle of spores, which came out in this book as well. So yes, I'm a fun guy.
Are you going to be that?
Hello. And finally, you like elves and druid, but want to explore an unusual direction. Perfect. I love, all that sort of thing is good. But like you said, this idea that everyone acts as one organism, to the point where, jumping ahead a little bit, this idea that your renowned stuff, it literally, as you go up the ranks, it's just because the guildmaster knows your name at some point and will ask for you by name rather than just like, you all go and do this thing, which I love. I think this one would be like, I would see the Golgari as a definitely like, okay, everyone is a Golgari party, we're doing it together as a sort of one-shot sort of thing. But I just love this idea that, I am a bug, but they know my name. Like, I have been chosen.
Yeah, it's like, what does it say? You can ask more monstrous members after the favours, renowned 10, so that you can ask them to help you. Creature's not obligated to, if it holds you in high enough esteem to at least consider it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, you at least get the chance to ask where they'll go, but you got in the room.
I guess it's that sort of apathy about everything, and it sort of goes along with that sort of thing. It's just it's great. They also have like a feature which is like the underground hidden pathways, and so when you move throughout the city and travel between two locations, you're twice as fast. Haunted by dangers, so it's not necessarily going to be safer, but you at least know about. It's a bit like difficult terrain, that sort of being able to pass with like rangers. I think that's the other thing. The skilled spells, you've got very typical ones, like Ray of Sickness, Protection from Poison, Animate Dead, Plant Growth. So again, that life and death balance, which we see in Witherbloom, that sort of Strixhaven sort of what I call the potions Slytherin house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Definitely. I'm just staring at the art again. It's so cool. This like underground sort of like inverted tower is so cool. And it really gives that sense of it, this sort of like very slightly culty sort of feel to it as well. Which
it's a bit like they're trying to advance for the greater good of everyone, right? It's to get that greater good, the common goal again. It's all connected, isn't it? Really.
Definitely, like you could see people getting interested in playing that sort of like, if you wanted to go down that, at least having some missions that involve that guild. You know what I mean? Maybe not being in that guild itself, but definitely coming across them on a regular basis.
Yeah, maybe you'd have maybe you had this in Dragon Heist, I don't know, but this idea that you would have a meeting of certain guild members or certain things, and obviously everyone's, there's a representation from every guild place, and then you have, they're here. Hello, are we late? We brought snacks.
Oh no.
Oh, sorry. We should have cleaned them.
And they're just drooling on them. It's just like gobbing everywhere. Yeah. It also reminds me of another Naruto character. Talking about Naruto characters, the one who has all the ants that control the beetles and stuff that can steal chakra.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the final one then, the Gruul clan.
The Gruul clans, our barbarians.
Sort of mentioned at the beginning, so they basically hate civilization. They think it would be just better if we just go back to pure wilderness that thrived before the City of Ravnica grew. so that true order of nature can be restored.
And it's not nature in the sort of hippie happy one that I liked. It's the nature in the sense of civilization is a source of oppression and weakness. But I like the idea that they haunt like alleyways, abandoned ruins and stuff like that. So these sort of like those sort of post-apocalyptic scenes of sort of things kind of comes to mind, which is that.
And so here you have it's compared to all the guilds where there was a vague sort of structure or some sort of hierarchy or even just an organism. If you're looking at the Golgari Swarm, here is actually it's a collection of sort of disparate clans. So there's no single leader, or there's no sort of headquarters, because they are on the fringes of Ravnica society. But they will respect strength and a willingness to follow a strong individual that points them in the direction that follows their ideals. But as a result, obviously, that means it cuts down to several different main clans that you could be a part of or that you know about. But then the leaders of them could change within days, just because there's that sort of show for power and strength. So you got conflict between guilds and then conflict between clans, and then within the clan itself. So there's all this level of conflict you could have if you chose to be part of the Gruul clans.
And obviously for them, they had one of their original leaders got the coolest name, Lord of Chaos. But yeah, what's quite sad about it, though, in some ways, is that because this city is now grown to expand the whole of pretty much the whole of the planet, this idea that they used to live the most remote part of the civilized world, that because of the expansion, they now are forced into living in the cities, but where there's parkland and ruins, basically, which is kind of, there's definitely a sadness to it, which is
that they've just been sort of uprooted and displaced is the word I'm looking for. And it's interesting, again, the goals and sort of the philosophy behind them, really. I mean, there is this, obviously, the aggressionness and I'll say it, the savagery of it, which is maybe not great for where we are now, but it talks about this idea that they're driven by impulse, and it's about living in the now with little concern for forethought, planning or speculation. They just want to get stuff done. Like, it's not working right now, so what can I do to fix it in this moment right now? And they just want to live their lives unimpeded, and they just want to... And they'll lash out and they'll just get angry because they're just merely existing and not thriving, which is it's so sad. And this emotion and impulsive compared to, say, the other clans. When you think like everything else is sort of, I think, very restrained. So you think the Azorius Senate and the House Dimir, they're obviously very sort of, they keep their cards close to their chest. And the Boros Legion, they're like passionate about what they do, but with a certain military precision and stuff. And it's compared to the group who's like, fuck this, actually fuck this.
Exactly. And also with this, you get the different clans that you can look at and joining, so there's a little bit more selection amongst them in terms of different ideals, which, without going too deep into them, they all have a little bit of a separate little flavour to each of them, which is quite interesting. And
I guess compared to the other guilds as well, this gives you room to create your own clan if you wanted to, and that sort of thing, because there's a load of them. And you're like, whoa, which is great, because maybe that's what the in the Magic the Gathering setting, they have a full rooted history and stuff. Obviously I haven't played it or anything like that, and it makes sense if they've got 8 card sets, maybe there's a whole Gruul clan as well. But looking at the characters, are usually chaotic, often neutral alignment, so again, not necessarily evil, which is great. Suggested races are human, centaur, goblin, and minotaur. So centaurs get a look in on this one, which is cool. Suggested classes: barbarian, cleric, druid, fighter, ranger. You might enjoy playing a character who belongs to the Gruul clans if one or more of the following statements is true. You enjoy playing rage, mad barbarians, and savage druids. Tick. You want to throw off the shackles of civilization and indulge your inner beast. You
do play all rage barbarians.
I do. You like being a force of chaos who keeps things moving in your adventures. Tick, tick. I don't have time for planning. So I guess if you're playing it like that, then that could be quite interesting. And again, if you're having a party that's made up of different characters from different guilds, throwing a Gruul clan membership into the mix, that'll be fun, because you'll be like, there's always like, I can imagine it's like always House Dimir people going, okay, so we're just gonna keep calm in the shadows, and then you just go, I hit it with an axe. No.
Yeah. Fight now, plan dinner. But they got a lot of fun. I think as well, just thinking of like a campaign that you could play, and I think it could be something interesting, particularly in the current climate that we live in, that there is there's a lot of symbolism that you could play on the change in, the industrialization and civilization, overpopulation and urbanization of the world. It's kind of an interesting piece. And even if you don't play in the clans, it's definitely a theme that you could have running through your campaign about the sort of, because there's another we'll get onto next week that deals with nature and relationship to nature. And I think that it's a very interesting theme, something that I wanted to play when we did our City of Myths campaign, which I never got round to, but that sort of theme of urbanization.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem, it seems like an unusual one for a D&D campaign, but here in Ravnica, totally makes sense. And again, going back to that whole sort of overview of it, it's a world with 10 clans fighting for power, but actually, if you look at it, it's like, what kind of power? What are their motives? And it's actually very rich, and you can do so many cool stories with it.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily power, it's just, again, I'm going to keep going back to it, the sort of philosophical nature of it, that which it allows you to open up in your games, which is what Planescape does and what this actually does a little bit because of that. It gives you some philosophical things to mull over in your campaigns if you're interested.
Absolutely. And just to quickly round off, so the renown stuff for the Gruul. Renown amongst the Gruul could also be called glorious, so it's when you prove yourself in battle and earn the respect of your fellows. So again, it's interesting here, the sort of like, you are proven, you're a beast friend, you're celebrated, you're a chieftain. That's sort of like that you've won, you've gone and done the thing, what you set out to do. And it's that I quite like that. Again, it's all these sort of rank and renown stuff. Again, they're all sort of flavoursome stuff, and you can get more allies and all that sort of thing. So you don't need them, but I think it just ties in so well. And I think they're also very thematic, and they've really been thought about, which I really like.
The personality traits, the only ones that I actually want to make a note of are these, because I found them quite funny, because they are good and they really hit the mark. The other ones all do, but these ones are more entertaining in the sense. So you've got I'm not going to say all of them, but one of them are like, go ahead and insult me, I dare you, sort of thing.
That's really cool.
Don't tell me I'm not allowed to do something.
That's really cool. I like that.
There's a couple of others that are great, but one of my favourite is, hurrah! I rarely form a coherent sentence and prefer to express myself by breaking things. They're such good. They were really good ones. I think they really hit them up.
There's a bond here that goes, Grrr! And then in brackets, I will do anything to prove myself greater than my siblings or ancestors.
Yeah. And the ideal is, to live is to feel and express the rage burning in your belly. but it has like a very coherent sentence afterwards.
And then one of the D6 flaws one on the 6 is like, I'm actually not all that angry. That is it. That is a whistle-stop tour for the first 5 things. And I know it's a whistle-stop tour, but there's so much to them. And we've only barely touched the surface of all 5 of them, but there's so many characters that I can suddenly visualize and go, oh, that'll be good for this campaign. Oh, that'll be good for that. Oh, that'll be good for this. And so I'm just like, really, I'm actually really excited about Ravnica. I didn't think I would be.
Yes, I totally agree. It's not what I thought it was going to be.
No.
Totally. Not how it was. I thought it was going to be very much more, slightly more cyberpunky, steampunky, Eberron-esque.
I thought it was going to be Eberron-esque, yeah. That's what it looked like from the image.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. The image, the front kind of gives that kind of quality to it. And then, so I wasn't expecting the setting, nor was I expecting the sort of political intrigue element of it at all either. Even though it said guilds, I thought it was just like, I don't know, Guild Wars or something like that.
Guild Wars.
MMO from years ago that I played for like 10 hours or something like that. I enjoyed it, and it's not like I'm going to rush out and play a Ravnica game like when we read Spelljammer and Ghostwalk, where I was like every moment like, loving every single bit of this, and this I want to put in everything I do. Mm-hmm. I definitely, though, could see, if I had more time than I had, wanting to play this.
But I think as well, for me, what I did, obviously I know next week we've got the other 5 clans, which I'm sure we'll when we get to them, I'll be like, oh, that makes sense why there's this on the cover. Oh, this makes sense, and it adds 2 onto it. I think, to me, 10 guilds is a lot. It makes sense for a world, but I guess what it makes me feel like is like, well, if I want my worlds to have this political campaign stuff, I can lift certain things from these
Yeah,
guilds.
100%.
These take these 5, and that you can always fill in the others if you need to. But I just think as a starting go,
I could even say you could use them as this is a city's ruling theology or whatever. If you know, theology is not right. With ideology.
It's each you could have sort of the ghouls that they're on the fringes of that civilization stuff, and then you have the 4 sort of ones the Golgari is all swampland. House Dimir is always very, very tall buildings with very imposing sort of Blade Runner.
You could have 2 as the opposing forces in the city or something like that. I think you're right. It's distilling those down, just because from a DM's point of view, isn't it? It's that sort of managing that level of information as well is always difficult. So I think
compared to other books we've read recently, other campaigns stuff, there's not necessarily a primer for players, but here is what you need to know about Ravnica in 20 pages. For me, I know this is such a tiny thing. I couldn't find the welcome to Ravnica on D&D Beyond.
Where is it?
So if you go to the page, this is such a stupid thing. So if you go to the actual index of it,
it's actually cool. Yeah, you have to go view welcome.
Yeah, that's where that first chapter is. That first couple of pages is.
I never found it because I went to the wiki you sent me because I couldn't find it.
Yeah,
that is why. Because I was thinking it goes straight into choosing character creation, chapter 1.
I read all of that, and I was like, I don't really know anything about the campaign. I'm really
because
worried.
That's when you sent me the thing. I haven't read it. I literally only watched videos and read the wiki.
So just to describe to the listeners, so on the D&D Beyond, so you have, what normally happens is that you have the list of contents and stuff like that, but they also have at the top join the guild. It says a little bit of introduction, and it goes
normally just says view cover art, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then it also there's a button next to it that says a green button, which you would just normally ignore, and it just says view welcome, and it's several pages of stuff which it's the introduction to what is Ravnica, the whole stuff about the Guildpact, which is kind of important.
Else, when you press that button on the Dragon Heist one, because I was just there checking stuff, it also gives you the pronunciation guide.
Wow.
So
wow. Now we know. Now we know. Dragon Heist.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, if you're looking for things. It doesn't have it for this one, but I'm just saying that we've not been finding it because it calls it the foreword on Wall Street Dragon Heist. So you think, well, this is going to be hey, simple, which it is, but it's also got the pronunciation guide under there.
Read everything. That's what we've discovered.
Press every button.
Always read the plaque. That's what 99% Invisible always says. Always read the plaque. Yeah. So the only reason I discovered that was because I read my actual physical copy of Guildmaster because I wanted to check something up, and I was like, wait, there's a whole 10 pages here
there's loads of information here that I just fortunately I thought it was very weird, and I thought maybe it's in the later, because we've read a few books, Fiona, and we've read a few books where the order of them, I don't know who Wizards of the Coast were playing or smoking at the time when they thought about putting putting them what they were doing, but they seriously do think it's a fun Spelljammer when the introductory book was 195 pages into the PDF.
So that stuff we said at the beginning about the history and the Guildpact player, you'd find it there. And it talks about what it's like living in Ravnica. The currency is different, Zibs and Zions, what the civilization comfort is, languages, it's all that sort of thing is at the front. And so that would be the primer I would give to players, read the welcome of this, and then like I said, maybe do a 2-page synopsis of each of the guilds, and then those people who want the guilds can read the full section.
100%. I'd also say there are some cool new races in Ravnica Guide, one of which we do use in our show, which is the Vidalcan, which is a really cool mix of changeling and goblins, which I think is really cool. And I hadn't really learnt much about them until we rolled them randomly on our game show, and I was they're just an interesting, seeking perfection and changing themselves to sort of find the sort of their sort of inner expression externally and stuff like that. And I don't know, just a couple of interesting, worth it for some of those. And you get Loxodons as well.
Oh, Loxodons, yeah. We'll have to do another sort of delve into races specific to this campaign setting,
or just other campaign settings that the sort of esoteric, that you might only get if you buy Theros, which I think they are now bringing into
The Mordenkainen Presents.
Yeah, Mordenkainen Presents. So we can maybe do a bit then.
Most of them will be, but I'm thinking like the Veldelkin and Loxodon, I think they're only specific really to Ravnica, so they might not appear in that book. Hamilton, thank you so much for this first part of Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, the first 5 guilds. What are you up to? What's going on? What's new with you, my friend?
I don't know where we are. I don't know when this is coming out, but we will still be running through our Shattered Realm Darkest Timeline on Dragon's Duel, which I found out today, is in the top 1.52% of Twitch streams.
Ooh, how exciting.
If you want to join that party. We are running through that, and we will be moving towards Endgame probably by the time this comes out. So there'll be big battles with Caractacus. If you know you played White Plume Mountain, which Fiona did. So
I did. I died.
You died. Yeah, and then maybe Mork Borg might play now. I don't know. Who knows? I might be doing something with that, playing that game. And what about what, when, how, who, where?
Yes.
Every time now.
So every time now. We'll get the order eventually.
It's my new way. Instead of saying like how's where going, and you say it's going fantastic. It's our new one. It's our own one.
It's our own little one. So yes, Where or What Am I Rolling is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very, very well. Things are happening. I also don't know what's coming out at this time. I think Long Haul 1983.
Please, come on. Like,
I know. I keep teasing
it
every time. I know. It's coming out. I promise it's coming out.
What needs to happen? What needs to happen?
No more interviews with Free League. That's what needs to happen. No, I believe.
Have you just not edited? Does it need editing still?
No. It's all done. It's already scheduled. But because the things with Free League were coming out April, I kind of was like, well, they should probably come out before then. So
no, that makes sense. So it is ready to go. It just needs to get uploaded.
It should be out beginning of May, but who knows when that is compared to this episode. We've got other things coming up. So we've got Numenera, we've got Paranoia, we've got User is Typing Message Sent, we've got probably You Awaken in a Strange Place. Loads of things coming out. So so we've got loads of cool, fun things coming up which have been recorded. I need to edit. But yeah, they're all good to go. So yes. And then finally, also, we have an offer code for Third Space Gaming, which is, you got your hands ready. If you type in the offer code DMBC into checkout, you get 10% off your first order. And that can be on D&D books, it could be other RPG things, it could be paints, could be minis. The choice is yours. So that's DMBC for 10% off your first order at checkout at Third Space Gaming. And there we go.
Well, what else is there but to say than see you on the flip side.
Bye.